Our story begins aboard the Supremacy capital ship in the unknown regions, but also on Ahch-To and everywhere else in the galaxy, as there's been an awakening in the Force. What or who the awakening is was unknown to everyone, but as the dark side of the Force was rapidly rising all across the galaxy, there would need to be light to meet it as always. Balance was needed. Snoke felt it, and on Ahch-To, Luke Skywalker was asleep in his small hut when he felt the tiniest bit of the Force trying to awaken inside of him as well. For around 6 years, Luke Skywalker, the former galactic legend, has been in exile on this world, cutting himself off from the Force completely. And every single day, while living on this island, Luke couldn't help from mentally reliving the moment that everything went terribly wrong. He was having visions of Ben Solo turning to the dark side. He saw the boy he trained slaughtering innocents without mercy. Planets were crumbling, trillions were dying, and Kylo Ren was at the center of it all. So, for the tiniest moment, Luke gave in to that fear that ran deep within the Skywalker bloodline. He knew the stories of what Anakin became after Sidious turned him, and Obi-Wan failed to kill him. For the tiniest moment, Luke thought there was only one way to stop Ben from doing all of this. And as Luke ignited his blade while looking down at Ben, he thought of Vader terrorizing the galaxy. And Luke thought of himself aboard the Death Star when he defeated his father. There was a moment where Luke felt his darkness, where he felt the power inside of him, and he nearly fell down the same path as his father. But he never did, because the future is always in motion. And as Luke ignited his blade, he immediately realized there was a better way to stop the rise of Kylo Ren. But it was too late. Ben woke up. He looked up to see his own Jedi Master turning on him, and that was the moment that cemented Ben's path. Luke created Kylo Ren. He fell for the manipulations of the dark visions, just like his father. So, Luke decided that the Skywalker bloodline has done enough damage. He felt hopeless. The child of Han and Leia fell under his training. The galaxy saw him as a hero, but he felt like the opposite. So he came to this world to die out, cutting himself off. And despite that, today, he still felt this tiny bit of an awakening. And as he felt it, Luke went up to the overlook atop the temple, and for the first time in years, he opened himself to the Force just a tiny bit. Just enough to feel this awakening. And almost immediately, Luke saw Starkiller base. He heard Han Solo call out to Ben. He saw the two of them speaking to each other, but then Luke would see Ben stabbing Han, killing his own father, pushing himself further into the dark. The visions ended, and Luke had to hold on to the rock, breathing hard. The Force hit him like a tidal wave, and as he was still feeling it, he was in agony after seeing Han die. And Luke reached out across the stars, reaching out to the one person he could find in the Force, no matter where she was. Luke found Leia, simply saying that he is sorry, and then Luke cut himself off again as best he could. But all the way across the galaxy, in the Resistance base on Dakar, Leia was alone in her quarters as she felt Luke whisper his apology. Leia tried to reach out to him, but the presence disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Leia put her head down, disappointed, but after a couple minutes, she would speak to the corner of the room, telling him that she can sense his presence. And in the room, the blue ghost of Anakin Skywalker would begin to fade in. Leia and her father had an interesting relationship. Where Luke saw his father as a Jedi who needed to be redeemed, Leia simply could not look past everything he did as Vader. She resented Anakin for what he did. Her ties to Vader were what got her ousted from the New Republic. But she also understood how powerful Anakin was, and how much he meant to Luke. Anakin came to her today. He said that there has been an awakening. He asked Leia if she has felt it. Leia said she has. It's unlike anything she's felt since Ben was born, and she asked what the awakening in the Force is. Anakin said there's not one thing, but the Force has been getting darker and darker for a long time. This awakening could be the emergence of light in the galaxy. And then, Anakin told Leia that this awakening has opened Luke back up for a bit. He can go to him if she would like. Leia just nodded, telling her father to bring Luke back. Anakin slowly faded, wanting to say so much more to his daughter, but understanding why she didn't want to speak to him. And back on Ahch-To, Luke was in his hut, trying to ignore the calls in the Force, when Anakin began to appear. Luke looked to his father, and Anakin said it's good to see him again. It's been a long, long time. So many years. Luke just told Anakin that he's wasting his time. But Anakin told Luke that the Force has shown him a warning. He's seen visions of Ben Solo killing Han Solo. His friends need Luke Skywalker back. Luke looked at Anakin as if he were insane. He asked him how he could act on these visions. Every time he or Anakin tries to change the future from their visions, they just bring death and destruction to the galaxy. Luke reminded Anakin of the stories of Padme and how his visions resulted in Anakin's fall. Luke also reminded Anakin about his visions of Ben turning to the dark side. He tried to stop them, and instead, he helped push Ben into the dark, turning him into Kylo Ren. And even with the amount of time that has passed, Anakin being reminded of his fall and of Padme, it still stung. But he told Luke that this is different. The visions of Padme dying, the visions of Ben turning to the dark, they came from the dark side. Darth Sidious and Snoke poisoned the Force. It showed both of them a dark future that they helped to create. But these visions come from a place of light. They come from deep within Ben himself, a small part of him begging for guidance, for a way out. Right now, he sees the dark side as his only path forward, but there's still time for Luke to save him, as he once saved Darth Vader. Anakin began to fade away, and Luke considered letting go of the Force once more. He considered returning to the galaxy. He was torn, and he was letting his fear guide his choice. And for the first time in years, Luke would meditate with the Force, trying to find the answers that he was searching for. And many hours later, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Finn, and Rey were planting charges inside of Starkiller base as they were making their escape when Han Solo spotted his son. He would yell Ben's name, and he would walk out to the middle of the long bridge to meet him. And as Han approached, Kylo Ren felt something deep inside of him, a mixture of more emotions than he could even recognize. There was a deep sadness and his regret for his life up to this moment. Kylo Ren remembered his early days with his father. Han wasn't the best father, but he certainly tried to be. But Kylo knew there was no turning back, and he knew that if he kills Han, he will become stronger. Snoke promised him as much. He will finally be able to rid himself of the remnants of light inside of him. The two of them stood face to face, and Ben would ask his father for help, saying he knows what he has to do, but he doesn't know if he has the strength to do it. Those words had two meanings. Ben and Kylo were fighting inside of each other. Ben wanted his father to help him throw away the red blade to help him find the light once more, but Kylo Ren wanted help finding the strength to kill Han, and in the end, it would be Kylo that won out. He felt the ignition switch on his blade, and he twisted the hilt to stab through Han's chest. But right before he could ignite the saber, it was ripped from his hands, flying towards the back of the bridge, and into the open, waiting hand of Luke Skywalker. There was a long moment of silence as Han, Ben, and Chewie would all realize that Luke was back. Both Rey and Finn looked at Luke with awe. He was a living legend. And Luke began walking onto the bridge as Han looked at Ben, realizing he was right about to kill him. Han had every right to be angry, but instead he was more sympathetic than ever. He could see how broken and desperate Ben truly was. But as Ben looked past Han and saw Luke, he felt rage inside of him. This was the man who ruined everything. He was conflicted about Han, but he truly wanted to end Luke Skywalker. So, Kylo Ren flipped over Han, landing in front of Luke, coming at him with a shocking aggressiveness, as Kylo would rip the saber right out of Luke's hands, igniting the crackling red blade, swinging for the Jedi Master. Luke ducked under the strike, igniting his own green blade, swinging at Kylo's back. Kylo blocked this strike, locking his saber against Luke's, and Luke told Han to go. Get out of here. Han didn't want to leave Ben, but he trusted Luke to do what was right and help his son. So, Han and the others took off out of the base, running for the Falcon. And as they ran, Poe Dameron and his squad of resistance fighters would storm Starkiller base, targeting the fuel cells with everything they have. And in the base, Luke and Kylo Ren continued their fight. And Ren was fighting with a power that was stronger than Luke expected. Had Ben killed Han, he would have been weak and confused emotionally. Plus, he was never shot in the ribs by Chewbacca's bowcaster. He was at full strength. He was fully focused. And Luke was, well, rusty, and also holding back a bit. They moved their fight out of the reactor room and through the hangar doors toward a landing zone. Ben attacked with a thrust, aimed for Luke's chest. Luke hit the blade aside, spinning behind Ben with a tight movement to strike at his ribs. Ben twisted, blocked, and as their fight continued, the world was beginning to erupt. Poe Dameron and his team hit the core. Starkiller base was imploding from the inside out. A giant crack split the ground where Luke and Kylo stood, but Kylo leapt over the crack, and he landed using two-handed strikes now, bringing down a crushing blow. Luke caught it overhead, shoving Ben's blade away, and they stared at each other. Explosions were rippling across the horizon. Debris was raining down around them. Luke tried to apologize, telling Ben that he has failed him. But Ben roared, rushing Luke with a heavy crosscut. Luke angled his blade, and he locked Ben's weapon, then pushed him back a step. Ben ripped a crate off the ground with the force, hurling it at him, and Luke sliced it cleanly in half. They met again, in the center of the landing pad. Luke shifted angles, striking at Ben's shoulder, knee, and then for his blade. Ben parried them, but his form was growing sloppier as the planet roared around them. Another explosion beneath the platform sent tremors all through the structure. And then, as the planet was in its final moments, the Millennium Falcon swept in from the clouds, lights cutting through the smoke and snow. The ramp lowered as Han and Chewie got to the opening, while Rey and Finn were flying the ship. Han yelled for both of them to jump up. They can still get out of here. Ben knew this may be his only chance for survival. He knew, if he makes that jump, then he will be abandoning the dark side. He looked up into the hopeful eyes of his father, and then he looked to Luke, and Luke nodded. Ben didn't even think about it from here. He just jumped up to the ramp. He grabbed the waiting hand of his father. Han had a smile on his face that carried decades of history with it. And then Luke jumped up as Chewie moved forward, wanting to catch him. But then the planet erupted even more, and as Luke was in the air, a chunk of a nearby watchtower crashed down, slamming right into Luke's side, clipping the Falcon as well. Luke fell down into the fire and dust below. The Falcon was forced to pull into the air. Chewie roared in agony. Han stared in shock. Rey and Finn didn't know what to do. But Ben closed his eyes. He shook his head out of pure disbelief for what he was about to do, and Ben jumped out of the Falcon. Han reached out, but his son was gone once more. Rey knew they had no choice. The Falcon couldn't keep up much longer. The world was exploding. She didn't know that Ben jumped off the ship, and she hit the engines, blasting off out into space. Everyone in the ship was silent. They were certain that Ben and Luke were gone, just like that. But down on the crumbling, fiery surface, Ben found Luke stuck under the steel watchtower. So Ben dropped to his knees, muttering to himself that Luke doesn't get to die on him like this. He is the one that will soon kill him. Luke opened his eyes for a moment, muttering Ben's name, and then he went unconscious again. Ben said they have to finish what they started. He tried pulling the tower up, but it didn't budge the first time. The ground split, falling away just inches from Luke's head, down into an endless core. Ben planted his feet, screaming with all of his power, and he lifted again. This time the beam tore free. Ben staggered forward, dragging Luke through the terrorizing area. The visibility was terrible. Step by step, he kept moving, dragging Luke with one arm, until he reached the last intact transport. The pilot was dead beside it, with a shard of metal piercing his heart. Ben coughed, pushing forward, dragging Luke into the cabin. Pieces of debris were slamming into him. Flames roared behind him. Ben climbed in, dropping into the pilot's seat, breathing hard. The transport shuddered, and the ground under it fell away completely. Ben fired the engines just in time. Columns of fire rose like walls. Chunks of the planet's crust launched into the air. Ben gripped the controls, teeth clenched, shoving the transport through the debris field that spun faster than he could track. A new explosion ripped through the area, knocking the ship into a spiral. Ben fought it, forcing the nose up. The view ahead was a tunnel of fire and collapsing rock. Ben pushed the throttle until it hit the limit. He cut left, rolled under a stream of molten ore, then pulled up through a gap between breaking plates. His instincts carried him. His blood carried him. He was trusting the same guidance that once let Anakin land half a ship on Coruscant, and that let Luke destroy the Death Star. The world behind them split apart, and finally exploded into nothing, as Ben blasted the transport out of the inferno and into open space. But at the final second, the engines in the hyperdrive were damaged. The ship spiraled out of the explosion, narrowly missing debris, but in the end, the ship was stuck in space without any ability to fly it. The ship floated lifelessly, and Ben hoped that maybe the Falcon would come and find them, but he quickly gave that up. He turned to stare at Luke, and he would allow the dark side to seep back in. His conflict was so strong. He didn't know who he was. Was he Ben Solo? Was he Kylo Ren? He didn't know. But he decided what he must do from here was call Supreme Leader Snoke. He will want to see Luke die with his own eyes. So, in this First Order shuttle, Kylo Ren punched in the code for Snoke's ship. He could kill Luke right now. He was unconscious. It would be easy. But he knew, deep in his heart, he saved him for a reason. When Luke eventually stirred awake, he took in the surroundings, and then he simply thanked Ben for saving him. Luke found himself handcuffed, and Ben muttered that he was just doing his duty to the First Order and to Snoke. And just a moment later, Luke would see the Supremacy capital ship emerging out of hyperspace. Luke just looked on, telling Ben he could feel his conflict. There's a reason he jumped to the Falcon. Something clearly changed in him when Han came back to save him. Ben just pointed a finger at Luke, telling him to stop talking. He's lost. The Republic has been destroyed. And now, the Supremacy will go to the Resistance base and end the foolish group opposing the rule of the First Order. Luke told Ben that he sounds like a puppet for his master, and he's more like his grandfather Anakin than he even knows. The transport would be pulled then into the Supremacy ship once it arrived, and once inside, Ben put on the mask of Kylo Ren, and he would take Luke through the ship towards the throne room of Snoke. And as they walked, Luke noticed how many stormtroopers stopped in their tracks to look at him. This was different than when he was brought to see the Emperor, and yet he was getting deja vu. He still trusted Ben, just like he trusted his father that day. Together, they entered the throne room, and Luke stared right at Snoke, sitting with the arrogance of the Emperor, staring at him with glee and victory. Luke nodded to Snoke, remarking that his injuries from their first encounter aren't yet healed. Snoke let out a laugh, telling Luke it has been a long time. But he is delighted that Luke will be a witness to the deaths of his friends, including Leia, Han, and that beast Chewbacca. The Supremacy then jumped to hyperspace for Dakar, home of the Resistance, as the First Order tracked Resistance spies to that world. Snoke wanted to personally oversee the destruction of the final enemies with Luke aboard his ship. And on Dakar, the Resistance went from celebrating their victory on Starkiller base to quickly going into full evacuation mode and battle preparation mode. They knew the First Order was coming. And in the throne room, as the Supremacy continued its flight, Luke told Snoke that he underestimates the Resistance. It was the downfall of the Emperor, and it will be his downfall as well. Snoke stood up, pacing the Red Room, and he told Luke that he views history a bit differently. From his point of view, the fall of the Empire was escalated because the Emperor's powerful apprentice, Darth Vader, turned on his master, and that was what led to Palpatine's ultimate defeat. Snoke then turned to Ben, saying he will not allow the same fate to happen to him. Snoke lifted a finger, blasting Ben with a powerful strike of lightning. Ben crashed hard into the far wall, and Snoke used the Force to pull Ben's red blade into one of his hands, and his helmet into the other. Snoke crushed the helmet, then ignited the crackling blade, telling Ben he's always been a pretender. His need for theatrics has grown quite embarrassing. Ben slowly got to his feet, telling Snoke he is loyal to him and to the First Order. But Snoke shook his head, telling Ben he's felt his shift in the Force. He's let the light back in, and he failed to kill Han Solo. He's a waste of talent, and he will pay with his life. Snoke waved to his 8 red guards, and he told them to kill Ben Solo. A moment later, though, the Supremacy would emerge from hyperspace above Dakar, alongside a dreadnought and 3 Star Destroyers. The end of the Resistance was here, but Luke would not go down without a fight. The moment Snoke was distracted by the guards approaching Ben, Luke flipped through the air, cutting his handcuffs on the ignited red blade that Snoke was holding, before sliding down behind Snoke and igniting his green saber. Snoke smiled, telling Luke a fair fight is the only way to properly end the saga between them. And across the room, Ben watched closely as the guards approached. He didn't have a weapon, but he had the Force, and Ben fought with nothing but instinct and fury, dodging a vibroblade thrust, slamming his elbow into a guard's ribs, Another lashed at him with an electro whip. Ben rolled aside, grabbed this whip, and pulled the guard in for a lethal crack, stabbing him with a fallen blade. He fought in tight, quick motions, hooking a leg, wrenching another blade free, barely staying alive under this coordinated assault. He was grazed across the back from a staff, and he readied himself for more fighting. Across from the room, Luke clashed with Snoke. Their blades struck in heavy, powerful swings. Luke drove forward with strength that he hadn't used in years, and even while fighting Ben, Luke held a ton of his power back. But now he was going all out. Snoke countered with smooth, controlled cold movements, testing Luke's balance with blasts of the Force. Luke circled around, struck for Snoke's shoulder, then dropped low and forced him backward. Snoke hurled a shockwave of lightning across the room, sending Luke sliding, but Luke pushed back to his feet, returning the pressure with a blast of his own. Ben managed to glance over to the two of them, and he could barely track Luke's movements. It was like the Jedi Master had more than two arms as he fought Snoke. And meanwhile, above Dakar, the Supremacy, a dreadnought, and 3 Star Destroyers launched TIE fighters, as the Resistance launched everything it had. Poe Dameron led X-Wings through the dreadnought defenses, as Resistance bombers were preparing for a run of their own. The Falcon flew alongside Poe. Han and Chewie were fighting as if this was the Civil War all over again. And in another ship, Rey and Finn flew together, protecting the bombers as they descended towards the Supremacy. Turbo lasers flooded the stars, trying to stop the Resistance bombers. One bomber would disintegrate instantly. Another released a payload just missing a Star Destroyer. The Resistance was losing the space battle. Back in the throne room, Ben was cut across the leg, and a whip wrapped around his neck, choking him as he was pulled down to his knees. He had already killed 4 guards, but the final 4 were too much. As he was being choked out, a staff was lifted and about to be plunged into his heart. But then all 4 of them were thrown off of their feet, crashing into the wall with enough force to shatter their bones as they fell dead. Ben turned, breathing hard, and he would see him for the first time. Truly the legend, Luke Skywalker, standing tall as a true Jedi. Snoke was knocked down in front of him, slowly climbing to his feet, and Luke told Ben to go, get into his starfighter, make sure the bombers outside finish their run to destroy this ship. Ben told Luke to come with him, but Luke said his responsibility is here, ensuring Snoke cannot win or escape. Now go. And Ben gave him a nod before taking off. In the throne room, Snoke slowly got back up, and he threw the red saber away, sinking deeper into the Force than ever, telling Luke he will not stand in his way any longer. And out in space, Poe, Han, Rey, and Finn were being pushed back, along with all of the other Resistance fighters. The 12 bombers the Resistance started with were down to 1, and it was targeting the capital ship. The fighters were doing all they could to protect it, but the TIEs were too many. Inside the final bomber, Paige Tico saw a fresh squad of TIEs coming right for her bomber. She closed her eyes, ready to die, but then a new ship emerged. Ben Solo blasted through the TIEs in his own TIE silencer, and then he flew into line with Poe, Han, and Rey, as Han realized his son is alive. The group continued to fight off TIE fighters, giving Paige the space she needed to unload the bombs right into the heart of the Supremacy. Inside of the ship, Snoke unleashed a storm of lightning that tore deep scars across the throne room. Luke caught all of it, then forced it right back at him. The air pulsed around them as they reached deeper into the Force, and Luke would lift Snoke off the floor, slamming him down, pinning him in place, despite Snoke trying everything to break free. And as Snoke looked up in anger and fear, the bombs crashed into the ship. Luke gave Snoke a final, victorious look, and the explosions of the ship would consume them both. As the Supremacy exploded, it crashed down into the Dreadnought and the Star Destroyers. TIE fighters were swallowed in the destruction, and in just moments, the entire leadership of the First Order would blink out of existence. With Snoke dead, and the remaining leaders lost in the battle over Dakar, the First Order collapsed into scattered factions fighting for control. The Resistance stepped into the vacuum as the only organized force left with the will to protect the galaxy, and it became a symbol of survival and hope. Luke's sacrifice was felt across the stars, and the Jedi legend that had faded into myth was real again. Ben Solo was redeemed, but the galaxy only knew Kylo Ren. His crimes couldn't be forgotten, and Ben didn't exactly expect forgiveness. He would hide on Agent Kloss, living in the caves and keeping to the shadows, while the Resistance transformed the world into its new home. Leia and Rey trained together, and in quiet hours, Rey would train with Ben. He guided her through the Force, determined to make sure she never fell where he did. Han and Leia, brought back together by their son's return to the light, rebuilt their relationship, and eventually, Rey and Ben uncovered whispers of a hidden power on Exegol. They went together, on the first true mission between them, and Sidious would die before he could harness his true power. Exegol collapsed, and the last of the Sith died with it. Rey began to build a Jedi Order, shaped by lessons from the generations of Skywalkers. Ben stayed in the shadows, speaking often with Luke's ghost, and they watched the Resistance become the foundation of a new order, as the galaxy would be free to move forward. And folks, that is our story for today. Hope you all enjoyed. Sequel story. The rare sequel story. Recently, I was asked to do more Galactic Civil War stuff, and this was going to be a Galactic Civil War era video, but then I was like, I actually want to write about the sequel era. And I know the movies are like absurdly controversial, like just, dangerously controversial. I don't hate them. I don't love them. I like The Force Awakens. I do like The Last Jedi. I do. I don't know. I think it is just like objectively kind of a mess of a trilogy, but I think the bones of it are there, and objectively the prequels are also a mess of a trilogy in some ways. So it's good. It's just, I get it. The fan reaction. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I don't hate the sequels. I don't love them. I like them, and I think they could have been done a little bit better. And in stories like this one, I don't bring Palpatine back until the end for like a sentence, just because he's the enemy in all of my videos, pretty much. So Snoke is the main foe in this one. He dies, and because Ben, turned to the light in the end, Palpatine's got no one to mess with. So yeah, I enjoyed this. Hope you did as well. Let me know what you want to see next, and as always, I will see you in the next video.